Good morning, everyone. We hope you're feeling merry and bright. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week, even during the holidays. Cindy, let's jump into the first question.
Our first one's from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. What batteries do folks use to power the MixPre 6.2 in the field? We have a field shoot coming up and have to figure out a 12-hour day of recording and can't bring our big batteries since we're flying.
Lots of them. Go ahead, Bill.
I'll talk in general because I know Alex uses the MixPre 6 a lot, and he'll have really good specific to that. I will just say that I tried to narrow my battery arsenal down. I used to have Anton Bauer's and V-mount batteries from Sony and NP1s, and I tried at some point to get it down to the Sony I can't remember the number designated, but the relatively smaller, high-density lithium batteries. I have a whole bunch of them in a case, and instead of going to different types of batteries, I try to stick with the name brands of those. There's just a couple that I trust because I've had a lot of problems with the online off-brand batteries just not having the capacity that the first-class Sony-style batteries and there's a couple of vendors that do a really good job and we can trust, but there's a lot of those Chinese offshore batteries that just fail really early for me. And then I try to use those in adapters if I have to go to a bigger form factor. But that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to let Alex do this because I know he's really into this with the MixPres.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and I have to admit that I mostly, if I'm in the field, I'm using a Scorpio, which has its own set of batteries. And so with MixPres, they've mostly been interfaces for me. Mickey said Inspired Energy NH2054E Smart Batteries is one place to go there. So, and they said that companies like Autoroot, Remote Audio, Deity, and even Sound Devices themselves sell a rebranded version of this battery. He said, but you can pair it with the Hawkwoods SD1 sled to give your MixPre a 4-pin Hiroshi input, and that's the one that I have. I have the Sound Devices branded version. It's the same thing, but it's a sled that pops into it. Now you can have a Hiroshi input. And remember that while you can't travel with large batteries, you can travel with up to 99. So the 99 watt hours batteries. And so you can carry as many of those as you would like. So they just can't be any bigger than that, and you have to be able to put them in your carry-on. I think that on some of my remote shoots, I've taken up to 4 on my backpack, kind of down in the lower area there. And again, you just can't have any one of them be bigger than the 99. So I use the small rig ones. I think people have all kinds of different opinions about which ones work, but they have a lot of services on the small rig. I believe, to keep it simple, and I have not tested this, but I believe that you can take the USB-C from the small rig and put it right into the USB pre of the MixPre, and it will run it. Like if in a pinch. It's probably not the way I would set it up, just because I don't think a USB-C is a great connection for shooting for 12 hours. But I think you could just power it with that USB-C. It'll power from a 5-volt. The MixPre will power from a 5-volt USB-A to USB-C connector. It will complain about it, but it will run. So it'll keep on saying, there's not enough power here, but it actually keeps going.
Next question.
Here's a QR code question from Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. How do I connect my old computer tower with a VGA cable to my new computer with USB ports? I tried a VGA to USB adapter and it doesn't work.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
If it doesn't work, then you need to get drivers for the USB to VGA. There are some. Well, it also depends on what you're connecting. If you've got Windows 95 on there, you're definitely going to need drivers. If you've got Windows 10 on there, there are some USB to VGAs that will have drivers built in. And then once you turn on the computer and let Windows load up, even though you're not seeing it, I'm assuming you're seeing it blind, that it will eventually start to pick up. You need to give it a little bit of time for those USB drivers to work. But if you're driving blind on this, then you probably want to get some sort of video card into there because a lot of them, the first first VGA to USB were called DisplayPorts, and they used a DisplayPort driver. Even today, if you get anything with DisplayPort inside, you have to install the DisplayPort driver for it to work properly. So keep that in mind. But you could try some other USB to VGAs. But if that doesn't work, you'll probably have to put a video card of some sort in there.
And it might work out to, if you have an older screen lying around, or you can get one pretty inexpensively that can take VGA in, you'll be able to see that computer without needing to do any sort of conversion. And from that point, it's probably a networking thing. You want to be careful with an older machine how long you leave that thing plugged into the network or into any network that's got access, to the open web. But with that said, I was able to get into I was able to FTP into an OS 9 machine within the last year using Ethernet. So, but yeah, definitely helps to have eyes on the machine. Next question.
Fred Maher in Los Angeles from the QR code again. I'm a pro audio guy getting into video and streaming. I'm planning on using ecamm. I need 2 physical camera sources and 2 physical audio sources. What interface would you recommend that can do both, or should I use discrete devices?
John?
You can go down 2 paths here. You can either take like the Blackmagic or AGA cards to capture the video in, and then use a separate interface, any interface you want to kind of bring the audio in, or if you want to combine it into one device, the Rodecaster Video is a pretty solid device. It's got the XLR in, it's got a bunch of HDMI inputs. It doesn't really scale if you want to start getting into like the SDI workflows, but that's a good place to start and start learning video.
Alex?
Yeah, I would use 2 discrete devices. I wouldn't try to find one that did both of them, because you probably won't be able to have the same control. You'll get some control over the video or the audio. You got to pick one. Yeah, you definitely can get. I mean, it depends on how mobile you want this system to be. This is something where you can have a video card, some kind of Blackmagic card, as John kind of alluded to, that you can get 4 inputs in pretty quickly, or you can have something outboard to do these captures. So it just depends on how far you want to go. But I don't think you're going to get, and then as far as audio goes, these are 2 physical sources. A Zoom, a MixPre, there's lots of options. There's also, of course, universal audio and lots of other things that you can use to get two audio sources is not hard, to pull in.
And remember, Fred, friends don't let friends plug AV capture devices into hubs. Make sure those are right into the computer, because even though you're expanding, just save yourself the headaches. Next question.
Next one's from Douglas Carmichael. Would the DJI Neo be a solid choice for getting started with drones? I like the size and propeller guards, but when would the lack of 4K 60 capability be an issue?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, as to the lack of a capability, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself, Douglas, because nobody knows exactly what you're going to be shooting. But I would say that of all the makes and models, DJI has a pretty stellar reputation for making excellent products that are easy to operate. They have the latest technology, the latest automation, and things like hovering and things like that. Their algorithms are pretty much second to none. Every device that I've ever owned from DJI has worked as promised, reliably, and has been a really good value. And you're talking about a $200 investment here. I agree with you. If you're going to be learning, having those big, monstrous propeller guards, particularly if you're going to be fiddling around inside your house or something like that, is a really big plus. So, yeah, I would say, without hesitation, give it a shot.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Neo is great. As far as learning how to pilot, DJI got a lot of pressure from that. There was a lot of other Chinese companies that were undercutting their Chinese product, and coming in at this $200 mark. So I think they had to find a way to get down into that price point to kind of protect that space, and the Neo is that space. And I think it looks like a pretty good one. I don't have one. I have looked at getting one. I have an old Mavic that I and I'm still capturing with that, and it's I think it works great as far as flying around and taking, grabbing things. It's not going to be something I use in production, but it does let me think about shots and kind of play with those things. For me, it's pretty hard, and I don't think you would have this problem. I can't take mine out without giving my cell phone to DJI because I live near an airport. So I don't think the Neo fits inside of that problem. But the only other thing I would think of is when you're learning, really think about FPV because when we've used drones recently, we're mostly looking for FPV operators. We've kind of moved past the drone operators because a lot of times if we're going to go to a drone, we really want it moving through things and so on and so forth. So the only thing I would think about is whether you want to look at one of their FPV solutions, which is a little bit more expensive than but to get started, the Neo is great. But that's where we're seeing more demand for operators is FPV drone operators. Those are first person. So you're putting goggles on and flying through things, and dexterity is a lot higher.
Your questions and votes drive this show and every show at Office Hours. So you can use Makana to get in there, chat about the questions with the other producers, ask your questions, obviously, and vote on them. If you don't have access, just go to officehours.global/join, and then you'll get all the links for Makana, Discord, and all the good stuff. Next question.
Next one's from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. A POE NDI PTZ, like the Ikan Ottica or BirdDog, and put the camera controller and a BirdDog NDI to SDI converter on my Ubiquit DM SE. Will I be able to supply power, video, and camera control all over one Ethernet and decode with power over Ethernet?
John, help us decode this alphabet soup.
Yeah, I'm not sure any decoding needs to be done on the camera, but it looks like at least the Ottica is just standard PoE. The Ubiquit, the Dream Machine, does offer standard PoE ports. Should be no problem powering it as long as it's under 15 watts.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. As long as you have PoE involved, PoE doesn't do anything about decoding by any means. But if you have something PoE, even if it's not the Ubiquit, you can get injectors to pass it through and power up your devices. But definitely make sure that you don't overpower that PoE device, which you probably shouldn't with just two devices like that.
Next question.
Bunsak Dorji is asking, hi, Alex, can you explain the workflow of doing instant replay and resolve from ISO recording? I want to understand the workflow. Many thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
I can't do it. I haven't. So I've been talking to Brandon Goodyear, I know, who's been on the show in the past, is playing with this right now. And so I know that he's been kind of fiddling with it. And he's pretty excited about it. I haven't had time. I'm hoping next week I'm going to have time to sit down and actually try to get this to work. It's not so much with it is what to back up a little bit. What Blackmagic has added to Resolve is the ability to, as videos coming in, you can record it and then you can play it back even while it's still recording those pieces. And so this isn't just a growing file. This is really an attempt to replace an EVS, at a much lower price. The EVSs are $100,000. The Resolve is a lot less. So, but they're also adding things like the ability to address hyperdeck, and it seems like a lot of us have thought that Blackmagic should go after this market. We just didn't think they should go after it with Resolve. Like, it just feels like this. So I have to admit, the reason I don't know it is I can't get my head around the idea of taking this huge complex package and doing replay with it. Like, it feels like you want to have replay, kind of somewhere between. We're hoping that Robert Green and our team, gets time to play with it, because he's really the one to tell us, because he's an EVS operator. Like, that's what he does. So he'd be able to give us a better idea. But they built a controller for it, and so that might be enough to kind of make it more straightforward. Now, CJ's showing it right now. But I have a hard time getting around why I would use a whole package that doesn't feel like it would be as stable in this environment. But I do think that I need to play with it, because it does. A lot of people that I've talked to said it works great. So, yeah. Anyway, so that can't tell you what the workflow is yet, but we are looking at it pretty closely.
Next question.
Gabriela Eshsesal Mistira in Sault Ste. Marie is asking, Didn't ask about passkeys from Apple being more secure. Asked about the rando-made third-party app passwords required by platforms to allow an app, because Apple apps are less secure than their minimum standards. Why can't Apple meet this basic security level?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So, yeah, this was someone. This was asked before, and that's why it says didn't ask, because I was talking about passkeys and how things are getting more secure with passkeys. So they're not asking for you to log into an external server because it's more secure. That's not why they do that. If you buy an app at the App Store, the reason they want you to log in externally is because they don't want to pay Apple. So it's this is all about money. It has nothing to do with security. It is far more secure to have an app open up in your app store and not go to an external website and put in some kind of hokey, login that you now have to use some password manager to manage. It's far more secure to have it just being managed inside of the Apple ecosystem. It's all internal. It's all an internal checksum. It does not, this is part of the problem with what we're doing when we're fragmenting when we're fragmenting the App Store. We as users lose security. And this is one example of how we lose the security. And in addition to losing convenience and all kinds of other things. And so by forcing us to use an external, that it has nothing to do with security. It has nothing to do with it being less secure. It's far more secure to stay inside of the ecosystem than it is to go out to an external one and put a password in. So it's not, I don't know who told you that it was security. If they did, they were lying. I don't have any way nice to say it. It's more secure to stay inside the secure enclave.
Yeah, and it's super interesting to me because when it comes to an app specific password that any service has to generate in order to authenticate, the only time I actually find myself doing that is when I have an Apple app that needs to authenticate with, say, like Fantastical is the one that I always have, where it has an app-specific password that is just point-to-point saying my calendar is allowed to sync with Fantastical. When I get into enterprise environments or even things that I've made more secure with like a YubiKey or something like that, that's the time when I need to download an external application. And really, a lot of that has to do with insurance requirements when you get into the enterprise level where they'll have, in their part of the policy, they'll have, hey, these are the multi-factor authentication apps that we're going to approve, whether it's a Duo or an Okta or something like that, or a Twilio, not Twilio, but it's escaping me. But the point being, it is going to an external service to authenticate just as more of a paperwork thing than anything else. You could do it without that and have a two-factor authentication with something like a passkey, but for now, kind of the de facto is to use one of those third-party external apps. That's whether it's a Microsoft or a Google Authenticator, or like I said, a Duo.
And
next question. Sorry.
All I was going to say is that eventually what we're doing is we're starting to tamp down all these things, whether it's Apple or Google or Microsoft, to passkeys. Though we can talk about this thing, but passwords have maybe a shelf life of maybe 5 years, and then only old weird people will use them. Like weird companies, you'll be like, why am I doing this? Because, and it's not just Apple, it's everyone's going towards passkeys because passwords have become just unmanageable. That you have so many of them. I would say that you do need, if you're not using, you should use a password manager if you're doing it. Don't start typing in your own. In my opinion, and John can probably correct me if I'm wrong here, my opinion is that I have a password manager. I have a long phrase from my childhood that no one would ever know. It's kind of hacked up a little bit, but I'll always remember it. No one else would know it. And the only way you'd be able to guess it is a keylogger, and it's very, very long. Even, it's a phrase, and that holds my passwords for my password manager. My password manager generates, if it's allowed to, up to 26 characters of gobbledygook, that goes into every, and I don't try to remember any of my passwords. It does slow me down a little bit if I go into somebody else's computer, but outside of that, it's pretty secure. Do you have anything to add to that, John, as from a password security perspective? No,
I think it's, you're saying exactly the right thing. At least a 30-character password. What you want to make sure you do is, if you can, if you're familiar with rainbow tables, they can go through and hack almost any password, or at least discover any password very quickly, especially the more power you put behind it. And the GPUs that are releasing, especially with like the 5090 on the horizon, these things can crunch through tons of data. So making the most secure password before locking everything, making everything else unique, those are the things that are going to, keep you safe as best you can. Because if it's a targeted attack, it doesn't matter what we try, you're going to get hacked.
And today we have more single points of failure with more people than we ever had before, because you've got your sign in with Google, sign in with Apple. A lot of businesses are doing, a single sign on with their Azure credentials and things like that. That single point will get you into so many services. It's not an option anymore to just say, oh, I'll worry about that. Oh yeah, that's on my to-do list. I'm going to think about password security. You got to lock it down or your goose is cooked.
Yeah,
Next
passwords.
question.
Yeah, and passwords alone don't solve it. It's MFA. You have to have multi-factor, biometric, like things that are unique to you. A cell phone, like they're sending you a text message, it's so easy to intercept. That's useless. Like it's use those applications. Make sure you have MFA, and then make sure you're logging in. If it's really something critical, like anything we do at work within our cloud space, somebody else has to go in and verify that you're making that request. So it's it's beyond even just yourself. If it's something business critical for you, you should look at that as well.
Hey, our Saturday meeting this week is our volunteer meeting. So if you're around this Saturday and you are working on the back end, or even if you're new and just kind of want to see it's nice to go to the new volunteer meeting, but the volunteer meeting is great too. So there's a whole army of people on the back end who work every single day to keep this show up and going. And that's our place to talk. It's kind of Sunday style for volunteers. Check us out Saturday, 9 Pacific, noon Eastern. Next question.
From the QR code, Rafat Al-Sayed in Toronto, Canada, is asking, hey, legends, anyone used SoundTube focus point speakers? Are they easy to set up, or do I need an audio engineer? Planning to play audio from my laptop.
Go ahead, Bill.
I took a look at this website, and the first thing I thought when I got on there was, that's weird. They look like parabolic microphones, and they have a translucent or transparent, probably PVC or something similar, dome around what you would normally expect to be a microphone and a parabolic microphone, but these are speakers inside of these parabolas, and it just seemed like a weird thing to me. A directional microphone that doesn't really pay much attention to physics, because as everybody knows, low frequency energy is pretty directionless. If they're firing into a plastic tube, a plastic parabola, that's going to kind of change the nature of the sound out of it. I thought, where would I put that? Hanging over a table to deliver audio to a particular diner in a restaurant or something like that? Maybe, but it just doesn't seem like that's a thing. I can't imagine holding it up in a conference room or something like that to try to get directional beaming to somebody at the end of the table. That's not really going to work in a small space. So I'm a little leery of this whole thing. And then I clicked on the products just to see whether they had something other than these parabolas, and it died on me. So maybe I just don't understand, but this doesn't make a whole lot of acoustic sense to me at this point. I could be proved entirely wrong, but that's my 2 cents off the top.
Go ahead, John.
So typically see these deployed in like museums. So you'll have like a walk up to a station. They don't want sound spread all over the case. Typically with 70-volt systems, so you're not getting a lot of bandwidth. You're not getting a lot of highs, a lot of lows. It's just focused audio on like talking about what's in front of you, giving you a little bit of information. Yes, you should have an audio engineer if you're designing something. If you just need something to play really poorly sounded audio out of a laptop, then this is definitely your case, in a very, very small audience.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, there were lots of reasons for these. As I said, as John said, and Bill had alluded to, around museums and other places where you're trying to say, hey, if you're standing right here, I can give you that audio, and it's usually for spoken word, not for music. And so it's just there to give you information, but not bother everybody else. So I think that's probably the need for it. It's definitely not what you should use for your laptop.
Next question.
Pirag Cheetah in Dallas is asking, how can I make my Pelican case flypack setup lighter and more efficient by replacing the regular internal AC plugs? It currently has an atem, mini PC, and converters.
John Wallace.
I'm making an assumption you're talking about the external power supplies. You can buy devices that will give you multiple outputs. In a pinch, I've used stuff I've used for my guitar, where it has one AC power plug in, gives me a bunch of DC power plug out, and I can take that and use whatever milliamp output would power each device accordingly. This can definitely save a lot of space. I'm not sure if it's going to save any weight, but it definitely saves a lot of space within your flypack.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing on that. As for the flypack itself, you can always do some mods to take it out. Like, for instance, if you got wheels on the flypack, take the wheels off. If you got a little handle, take the handle off, and that's going to make it a little bit lighter. I don't know if you want to do that, but many people do mods with that. There are some alternatives as well that are a little bit lighter than the Pelican Air. I was trying to find the one I was thinking of, which is it's not really a hard shell as much as it's fabric. So you got to watch out for that. So if you're using it for heavy travel, then stick with what you got. But if you can transfer to something that's a little bit lighter, that doesn't need to be. You don't need to worry about TSA throwing the bag onto the plane or something like that. Then you could check out these alternatives.
And Alex?
Yeah, Mickey suggests the PSC Power Star Smart Travelers, and so this is a AC ones, DC many, so you can, and that's probably the kind of solution that a lot of us, when we start building these kits, try to get away from wall warts and anything else. If it's got a DC input, we want to get to a power distribution that is going to be all DC outputs. And so finding, PSC specializes in, well, they do a lot of things, but that's one of the things that they do well. So probably checking out their product lines might help you get rid of a lot of those bits and pieces.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. For quick down and dirty edits, does anyone use the GarageBand iOS app? I tried to use it the other day and import an MP3 I have on my iCloud drive, but couldn't find the import option in the app.
Go ahead, Alex.
I have to admit we don't. I find GarageBand to be very heavy. It's just that it feels like there's a lot of processing there for very little output. So I it's free, and my kids got used to using it, and so on and so forth. They went to the Apple Store, and the Apple Store teaches them how to use it, and then they started making songs, and so it's not that it can't produce some pretty great things. It's just that I always felt like it was a little clunky. Like I always felt like it was working and it wasn't as snappy. I was kind of like, I wish they would dumb down the interface a little bit so that it would be a little bit more responsive. So as a result, I haven't used the iOS app for that. And I was trying to think of the last time I tried to edit audio on my iOS app, and I can't remember, either on an iPad. I have to admit that I got excited that Apple was going with Final Cut and Logic to the iPad. But I admit, and it's not that much money, the subscription bothered me. Like I just was like, I don't really, like I just, like it's just another app that I'm going to pay for that I just don't know how often I'm going to use on the iPad. I don't know how much that's affected everybody else who might have downloaded it, but I just know that because of that subscription, I felt like they should have said, if you already own Logic or Final Cut that's free, or I don't know how they would even know that, but it just felt like it was, they were, I don't know, it felt like, I don't know why, but it bothered me that they were, because otherwise I would use Logic on, to do edits on my iPad, but I just don't, because I still take that personally. So I don't have any way, like, I'm just kind of like, it's only $5 a month, but I'm like, you didn't need to do that, and so I'm usually a pretty big Apple fan, but that was where my line got drawn.
I was able to test this out, Zach. So if you're in GarageBand, there is no obvious way for how you would add in an actual audio file. There's, add an instrument, add a vocal track, but there's no import, there's no file menu, there's no file browser. What you can do, however, is if you're in the Files app and you have a piece of audio that you want to put in there, if you just copy it from the Files app and then paste it into GarageBand, it'll show up as if it'll like almost do a workaround. In GarageBand, it looks like you recorded that. It comes up as just a generic audio input, but it's the song or the audio clip or what have you, and then you can get into all those editing tools to go and do that quick and dirty edit. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, for something quick and dirty like that, and you're not really looking for precision, this might be an iMovie task, and it's free and it's on your machine. And if you're an iOS, just try importing the sound into iMovie. If you want to ever do anything fancier, you can always take that file and bring it into Final Cut. But it just seems like that the GarageBand is a dedicated tool for people, for young people particularly, but for anybody who wants to make kind of their own arrangement of a musical thing, get a drum track, start adding stuff to it. That's kind of where their wheelhouse is, and bringing stuff in from the outside to mix it down doesn't seem to be their goal here.
And if you have friends who also have iPhones and also have some musical inclination, fire up GarageBand and do the jam sessions where multiple people can play their phones or iPads at the same time on a song together. If you don't have instruments close and you have a little bit of time to kill, like you're on a bus trip for your chorus or your band or things like that, it can be a lot of fun. And it's just an easy way, and it's nice that it's free. Thanks for the question, Zach. If you have a question, you can ask them 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, or you can hit the QR code right here. It's fast and easy. No sign up or login. All you got to do is go to askofficehours.global, put in your name, put in your question, and boom, we'll work it in over the next few shows. Next question.
Another one from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm adding more media to my Plex server that's currently hosted on my TerraMaster NAS. Might end up with 10 terabytes when all is said and done. What is the best practice to maintain the hardware and Plex so I can access and share with family?
Go ahead, John.
I was saying, make sure you have a RAID set up. Make sure you have enough capacity to be able to support failure of at least one drive. Depending on how much data you end up putting here and how hard it is to kind of maintain it, you may want to get some sort of backup system as well. As far as sharing with family inside the house is pretty easy. But if you want to share with people outside your house, make sure you're using SSL on your website. Make sure it's password protected. And if you have a firewall that supports it, geo-blocking places won't be reaching out to you, like China, Russia, India, the places that there's a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands, definitely protect you and help you kind of get around of many security concerns I've come across.
And if you haven't played with it as a front end to your Plex server, give the Infuse app a try. I've been doing the arduous task of getting all of my Blu-rays digitally backed up into my Plex server. I don't even have it connected to the internet. It's just in the house. But I want to be able to watch those uncompressed quality Blu-rays either in the Apple TV or in the Vision Pro. And I was like, okay, I'm going to download Infuse, try it out, see what's going on. It is so well done. It gives you all of the knobs to turn in terms of quality, in terms of do you want subtitles all the time? Do you not? But the real killer feature of this thing is it identifies with pretty good accuracy what the movie is, and then will bring in all of the things that you would expect if it showed up on streaming. Here's the poster. Here's a little description. Here's a properly formatted title. Here are the actors and the directors and the related movies that they've been in. Super impressed. I've only been playing with it for about the last week, and I have about 150 more discs to painfully import one by one. But check out Infuse. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois asks, what is a good tool for creating a database that will be usable for creating a new website? Trying to future-proof data entry to not need to re-input basic info for future redesign.
John?
So data entry can kind of go from this. You got Excel, Access, and then SQL if it's relational. If it's just a bunch of data that you need to put somewhere, tools like Redis and Mongo where a lot of people are going for unstructured data. But definitely if you put it into Excel with any sort of ETL tool for translating that data, you can move it into anything else if it's structured.
Bill?
I'd pay attention to what John just said. I'm a Mac guy, so the only database I've ever paid any attention to is FileMaker Pro, just because Claris, the company who kind of titularly runs it, is actually kind of like a stalking horse for Apple. It's kind of their in-house thing, so I think as long as Apple keeps going, it'll be there. It has never failed me in terms of taking in stuff from the outside and sending stuff back out to anything else. And so that I only needed ever in my life one, and that's it. But on the PC side, I got no clue. So next.
Jeffrey?
My issue is that whenever you're creating a new website for anybody, it's never going to be the same thing. So any of the tools that I usually used would go out the window, with the exception of the basics. But I have been playing around with ChatGPT. If you put in how to create a database for creating new websites, they're going to tell you how to do that. You can even have them create the program that's going to do it. And once again, it's really going to depend on which database you're going to go to. I'm guessing you're going to be in a SQL database, but it really depends on what type of websites you're creating, whether they be WordPress or whether they be inside of SharePoint or anything like that. So that's what I would do and play with that. I don't think there's any other tools besides what John mentioned that could really make this easy thing, because I think once you create it, you're going to have to do a lot of tweaking, and I don't think it's going to be a time saver.
Next question.
Jeremy Horn in San Francisco Bay, California, looking to purchase my daughter a solid multicolor 3D printer for her birthday. She's a PC user and would use it to make cosplay accessories and mounts for me. What would the panel recommend? Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I will say my son builds all my mounts for me. I just hand him things, and I bought him all the tools that he needs to measure things. He's got all kinds of, and I said, I just need this to do this, and I highly recommend that part. So it doesn't matter what color it is, although you would be deciding whether what kind of plastic you want. Creality is probably the ones that have from a PLA style printer, but you also have to think about, if she's doing cosplay, whether you want a extrusion or resin. So there are some resin ones that will do multicolor, but they are a lot. All of these get a lot more expensive. So you're talking about spending. I think there's Anycubic is probably the least expensive one that does multicolor. Also think about the volume that you need and the volume that she needs, as far as how big, do you want over 8 inches? What most people get to is 8 inches by 8 inches by 8 inches. Do you need more than that? And then that starts to become more expensive as well. So those are some, I don't have an exact one to use, mostly because I had a multicolor one years ago, and it just was so much work that I stopped using it and just went back to single color and painted things if I needed them. So, but I think that if you're really looking for multicolor, just know you're going to pay a lot more. It's going to be more quirky. As it works through it, there'll be more fixing. I mean, my experience was there was a lot more fixing than there was printing sometimes with that process. So,
Jeffrey?
So the cool thing about 3D printing in some 3D printers is that they're modularable. You could build upon them. Like, you can get new boards, you can get new extruders, you can get multicolor extruders. So my suggestion is, you don't even know if 3D printing is something that you guys are going to be really into. So I would suggest going to get the basic 3D printer. Creality Ender 3 V2 is a great start, and then see how it works from there. I've always been told, treat the 3D printing like a hobby, not a task, and you'll be much more appreciative of what's going on, because it's going to fail. And it's going to fail many times, and you're going to get really frustrated on how it fails. And then once you've mastered that first part, then get into the multicolor. There are ways to actually do multicolor with just the one extruder. Like, for instance, my old logo here is a 2-color thing. You basically have to watch the printer, and when it gets to a layer, you run some software that's going to tell you, okay, it's at this layer. It will actually stop the printer. You quickly change out the filament and bring it back in. When it comes to resin versus filament, resin is the stronger thing, but filament also has some abilities to it. Plus, if you do any type of it's post curing of the filament, it makes for a stronger print. But you got to also think about that for cosplay, because if you've got like something hanging from the shoulder that's going to easily be breakable, you want to enforce it as best as possible.
Alex?
And one thing to think about is also thinking about getting, for Cosplay specifically, is to go to a printing service for the final print. So use a less expensive single color basic printer. And then when you get to the time that it's time to get your final piece, is to send it out. I've done a couple of these in the past. So you get something like, I've used Shapeways in the past for this, and so you can send it out. They'll print in metal. So you can figure out what you want. You get it just right. You do all the iterations. When you know what it is, you send them the file. They'll send you back something in many, many, many different ways. You have a lot of options at that point. And you may find that is going to give you a more secure, like especially, again, for Cosplay or something like that, you want a pendant, you want something like that. You can have it much more robust being printed from a industrial level 3D printer as opposed to something you'd have at home. But you still need the one at home to figure out what you want it to do. And then you send it out to have it produced at the level. And it's not super expensive. You pay by like the cubic inch or something like that. So it's, or cubic centimeter. So it's not, it's not brutally expensive to have those final prints made.
Hey, we've got some new evening shows for you to check out. You can watch them live or later. If you want to look in live, that's going to be Extra Hours is on Monday nights, and then The Rundown with David Paskin is on Thursday nights. They're both at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. So that's our new evening shows. Check them out. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, is Blender popular for designing objects for 3D printing? I've also heard Fusion 360 used for that task.
Go ahead, Alex.
They both are used. Blender's probably the most popular 3D app used for printing just because it's free. So a lot of people use it. It is a very full-featured 3D application that doesn't cost any money, and so you end up with a lot of people who are using it to build their 3D tools. I know that my son builds everything that I print. I mean, I think he started in Cinema 4D, but the license ran out, and even though it's only like $10 a year if you're a student. By the way, if you're a student, you can get Cinema 4D for $10 a year, or a teacher. So that's a good deal. But he just went back to Blender, and a lot of his friends use Blender, and so I think Fusion 360 is also and he's also my son's also used Tinkercad to do those things. So those are other ones that you could use.
Next question.
Next one's from Jim Brooks in New York. Does anyone on the panel use Davinci on multiple computers, desktop and laptop, to edit the same project? If so, what is the workflow? Thanks.
John?
I just keep my files on my NAS, and then I'm able to connect to them from anywhere in my network. Obviously, wired is going to be a lot better experience for you, but that allows me to edit either on my Mac laptop or desktop.
Alex? And we need to dive into this a little bit more, but this is what the Blackmagic Cloud is designed to do, is to have kind of multi-tenancy, not only of multiple computers, but multiple users being able to be on different pages at the same time. And we are talking to more people that are being, it came out a little rough, but it's getting better. And so, more and more people are starting to use that workflow. But we'll see if we can't dig into it and talk about it more. It's one of those things on my list of, I should get good at this. And so I haven't played with it as much, but that's really designed to do exactly what you're talking about.
John?
And I do have the 8 terabyte Cloud Pod. It's very powerful. The network is good. I've had 3 or 4 people edit off the same device. It works pretty well, and obviously the bigger units function even better.
It's great.
Another best practice, Jim, as you're getting this project started, don't delay in getting Davinci installed on that second machine, and thinking, I'm going to get to it later. You want to make sure, if you're doing any sort of multiple editions of, or multiple machines running Davinci editing the same project, you want to be on the same version. So don't have one be on 18 and then the other one get up to 19, or I even get nervous. I know you're not supposed to be, but I even get nervous when they're like a different point release within the same edition of Resolve. Just those conflicts when it's a programmatic error are like, chasing ghosts, and it just can be an incredible time sink. So get everything set up on the same day and stay on the same version. Next question.
Here's a QR code question from Paul Kovacs in Elkhart, Indiana. I have 1 gig fiber at home. A competitor is putting in faster fiber. What are the best use cases at a home level and professional level, going from 1 gig to 5 gig up and down for extra $40 a month? Have a 10 gig switch already.
Holy smokes, Elkhart, Indiana, 5 gigs up and down. The RV business is good. Go ahead, John.
I really have to ask the question, what are you using today? Like, I have a 1 gig symmetric circuit. I find myself very hard to saturate it. Even with 2 kids at home, me and my wife will be watching TV, playing games, whatever it is. It doesn't seem to have any issue. I wouldn't pay an extra $40 a month unless I had a business use case for it. And also, one thing to remember is just because you have a 10 gig switch doesn't mean your backplane of your router can actually handle that, or any sort of firewalls, that kind of. So understand your full pipeline and what is able to support whatever security features those are. It's top to bottom. You want to make sure you can take advantage of that and not just have it come into your house and go into lesser equipment that can't support or provide that bandwidth that you're paying for.
And Jeffrey?
You can always get a router that splits up your internet connection. It's with 5 gig, especially if you want to keep your business and your home separate, and you're both doing things like uploading. The one thing I noticed, especially since I've actually dropped it back, unfortunately, moving into this place, is that things like Dropbox and other programs like that end up throttling. So when you go to upload a 1 gig file, it takes a lot longer to upload that because it's taking the upload speed and cutting it in half at least. And taking the time to upload it so it doesn't interfere. Whereas something like if you upload like a 4K video on YouTube, that's going to try and steal all the bandwidth. So whatever you're doing otherwise is going to get shoved out of the way to this big bully right here. So by splitting it up, your business side is secure, and it has 1 gig, 5 gig, but you can also set it 1 gig. Whereas the home, you can also set it 1 gig. It's not perfect when it comes to once it gets to the router to go out, but at least you have some sort of control as to what's going in the home side, what's going on to the business side, and maybe other sides as you grow and expand, and then worry about the electricity bill at that point.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, upload is a big deal for me, and so so I have about 300 up now, and there's almost no limit to how much I would want to go up, upload, because a lot of times we're putting things on servers, we're finishing something, and so it depends on whether you need to do that or not. As Jeffrey pointed out, Dropbox, Vimeo, many of the other ones have a tiny pipe for you to upload into, and so it doesn't really matter what your speed is because they're going to be way slower than you are. But then there are, production level upload services, whether that's an AWS solution or Frame.io. Like Frame.io will use up every amount of bandwidth that you have available to you. It'll just saturate the line. And so when you have a really fast 1 gig, or I've not had a 5 gig connection, but I've had a 2 gig connection, it really changes how you operate. Now, the only thing you have to be careful of is you start sending things to people that they can't download or they can't, because you just get used to like, oh, I can just send you I've uploaded a 2 terabyte file. Like you're like, here's a 2 terabyte file, and you don't think about it anymore because it doesn't take very long to get up there. So if you're using it for production, it's pretty important because there's many times when I have to deliver something to production that is last minute, last an hour or two before an event. It's 400 gigs, of data for a playback. And being able to I've had to, in some cases, before I had a little bit faster connection here, I'd have to drive to the office to upload it. It was still faster for me to drive to the office to upload it than to upload it from my house because it was just that much faster at the office, because it was a 2 gig connection instead, And so I think that's the challenge you get yourself into. So, even a 1 gig or even 500 megs. I mean, when I was up until like a couple weeks ago, I was at 40 megs up, and that was brutal. So anyway, I would say that you can also start to serve things. You can put servers on, available for other people. That you want to be careful with that and make sure that it's secure. But those are things that you can serve up. I know that a guy, I think, serves some stuff up from his house because he's got a 1 or 2 gig up and down, or maybe 10 gig up and down, something like that, something crazy, 10 gigs up and down. So you can be making things available to other people as if they were going to the cloud, but it's just to a server in your house. You just want to make sure that you understand firewalls and network security and everything else if you're going to start you start opening that up and making it more available.
If you're enjoying office hours, you sure can help. There are a few ways. You can subscribe to the channel, of course, but we're also a nonprofit, so you can donate. Just go to officehours.global/donate and chip in there. We'd appreciate it. Or you can always volunteer. Have a sign up for that as well. officehours.global/volunteer. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks the panel, would there be any way in macOS to see warnings that spinning drives are about to fail? I know Apple's system profiler says smart status verified, but are there any other early warning mechanisms in the OS?
Go ahead, John.
So within Apple, smart is what is universal. It's the drives actually reporting issue back. You can also run a verify disk command within terminal that will do like a sector check, and you'll understand like how many sectors have gone bad, what capacity you've lost. And then if it's in a really bad state, you can run the fsck command, and that will actually force the disk into recovery mode. And then there is a tool too from one of the guys from Twitter. I can't remember. Alex may know. The security guy. Spinrite, yes.
Steve Gibson.
Yeah, really great tool I've used to save many disks over time. It's been really good and saved me a ton of money for that small investment of buying that software.
I believe it's Windows only, though.
It is Windows only, but if you're in getting a hold of a Windows machine, even renting one is worth it versus sending to a recovery site. I felt that pain once, and I try to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, and the other things I would say, Douglas, is be on the lookout for things that wouldn't necessarily be reported, but you're going to notice if you're paying attention. Is the drive noisier than usual? Is it warmer than usual? Are file transfer speeds taking longer? If you fire a Blackmagic disk speed test and the disk speed read and write is not where it was, like it's trending downward. If you're worried about a drive, just replace it. Don't even think about it. Don't try to mess with it. If you have even a hint or an inkling that there's something going on with that thing, get a new one and get it off that. Make sure it's backed up or take it out of commission entirely, because that's a time bomb and you don't want to lose that data. You got to back it up to get it back. Next question.
Todd Worley in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have many, many terabytes of photos and videos. I'm trying to decide between some cloud storage option, e.g. Google, Apple, etc., or setting up a NAS with redundancy. This will be archival, not editing from cloud files. I don't even know where to start.
Bill.
Well, one good place to start would be do a workflow audit on what your process needs to be. And when I say needs to be, I found a lot of people who have been computing and doing media work for a long time, they tend to want to save everything, including a lot of files that your internal system can regenerate should you ever need them again. And if you have the luxury of not needing quick access, I've seen files that were 10 gigabytes of material sneak down to 10% of that or even less when you actually keep the fundamental original file, raw, or maybe in some cases raw plus a JPEG, and then everything else is really metadata explaining all of your decisions about how to process that to get to your final piece. You can toss away tons of useless stuff, and it's only useless in the sense that you can easily regenerate it. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of a workflow audit. Look at your files, look at your process, look at what you really need to keep versus what you can jettison quickly, and you will find you need a lot less storage than you might have in the beginning. My 2 cents.
Harshid?
Whenever you're looking at products, I would say the Google products at least give the versatility between Apple ecosystem and Google ecosystem. So if you're looking in specific to go to one product over the other, that could be one thing. And of course, redundancy with NAS is always a good thing. So I would go with Bill with the audit and then figure out what company would be best for you for spreading it across even with different platforms.
John?
Yeah, I would look at, do you need a NAS? So if you're not needing to share this information, you may just be looking at like a solution like OneDrive that you can install on your machine and it will back up the files that you need. If you're not looking to centralize your data storage, if you're not, many terabytes of photo, you may want to be moving that direction. Look at different, like Synology has different partners that they'll work with, and they'll just drip that data to the cloud. So you have your backup. It's there if you ever need it. But definitely just understand exactly what you're looking to accomplish before you start buying stuff. And then look into the long-term costs of those. Those are going to be subscriptions you're going to have for life. Understand that once you move into one of these platforms, it can be glacially slow to move out of them. And so you're making a long-term commitment. This is something you marry. It's not something you're dating.
And quick add on to Bill's point about kind of doing an audit about how much stuff you have to begin with. It's very helpful to get, if you're on a Mac, an app like Grand Perspective and some sort of equivalent for the PC that shows your files as a tree map, like the bigger squares or the bigger files. You'd be amazed at there's sometimes not a whole lot of files in number that are taking up a big percentage of your space. Next question.
Here's one from the QR code. Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota asks, the Verge reviews studio trends from 2024, holding mics, big headphones, and makes predictions about video and live streams in 2025. Lavs, in-ears. What does the panel think of their summary and predictions?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, well, first of all, we're at the 20-year mark for podcasting, which is great, whether it be audio podcast, video podcasting. Looking at this article, things have changed immensely from year one, where we were trying to figure out how to put audio right into the computer to begin with. So there's a lot of changes, and then a lot of coming back to the trusted and true, because the bottom line is that you want to create audio that you get great questions out of it, you get great content out of it, and you can hear what the other person is saying. That's why we wear headphones and other devices, so we can hear what other people are saying in Zoom. We're positioned to the point where we have a great frame for everything. Not all shows are going to be doing that. I would look through some of those pictures, and I would never put it together studios like that where the walls were just completely cluttered with a whole bunch of stuff, and then they tried to put that all in the camera shot, which meant that the people were like this small in there. But it was probably multi-camera shots, so they could probably get into the close-ups and everything like that. The whole point is that they're pretty on par with what 2024 is. 2025, it's just basically discovering the cool stuff. I don't know if that's going to be lavs or not, but I have a feeling if they bought big can headphones and microphones like this in 2024, they're not going to switch it up unless a sponsor comes in and says, hey, we'll change that out for you.
John?
Yeah, I don't see lavs or in-ears becoming popular until you see the large podcast hosts moving in that direction. So everyone wants to look like the most popular podcast. Everyone's going to pull up Joe Rogan, going to pull up the Kelsey brothers. What do they look like? What are they wearing? What mics are they using? That's what people are going to copy holistically. Most people aren't going to reinvest if they don't have to. A lav mic sounds terrible compared to a large diaphragm mic, or it's anybody can tell the difference of that. And in-ears is an investment that I don't think a lot of people even understand to make. And a lot of times if you're buying on the cheap end, it's going to sound worse. So it's not something that you're going to enjoy as a podcaster listening. So just be mindful that, yes, certain things will move in this direction, but holistically, I don't see podcasts moving away from the look and feel that they are today.
Alex?
I think that one of the things that they did talk about is that things are looking more and more professional, and I do think that the keeping up with the Joneses is getting harder and harder. I mean, I think we've already gone down this path, but more professional setups, more things are slowly evolving from a camera perspective. I agree with John that I mean I don't think we're going to move away from real mics, because the drop off between real mics and lavs is dramatic. It's dramatic. Like lavs are and if you're doing a TV show, it probably makes sense if you're doing something like This Week with George Stephanopoulos, but close your eyes and just listen to any of those news shows. So like just take a This Week with George Stephanopoulos and close your eyes, and what you hear is trash. I mean, it is just trash, and from an audio perspective, you just don't notice it because you're watching the video. But as soon as it becomes a podcast that you're actually listening to, you would notice it pretty quickly. And it again, I strongly believe that it increases your cognitive load to be listening to lots of little bits and pieces and all the other things that happen. A lot of these mics, in the same way that short depth of field actually makes your set look better, the mics, directional mics and high quality mics take a lot of pressure off of your set, because they're directional. They have a lot of off axis rejection, and they just throw away a lot of stuff that otherwise would be noisy. I do think that, I think people are getting more and more conscious to what that has to look like. I think the lighting is getting larger and softer. I think that Conan O'Brien, I think, has one of the best roundtable podcast setups right now. This is his setup here, and I think we've talked about it in the past, but these kind of low profile systems here. These are and then he's using SM7Bs, and then a kind of a low key. I don't know if you need to do both of these, but a low key, loco I think is fine for the wide shots. They're shooting through these gaps, so they're really right over the shoulder to do those. So shooting through the gaps is nice. This is the wide shot, but of course there's a lot of other shots that they have there. So, but I think that this is pretty good. I think that a lot of this, I think that someday we'll get rid of all the neon lights. I mean, I think that some lighting in the background is good. It's getting a little out of control. I agree with Jeffrey that busy stuff gets a little bit to be too much. As you start to look at these, I mean, this is a pretty built out one. I think some of the fake brick, like that one, Jeffrey's talking about, it's just horrible. Anyway, and then some of these, I think that sometimes there's not quite enough. If you're going to be in focus, you really have to think about whether you're going to use a faux surface or not. I think that's the real challenge. Is not you can use that, like, I have kind of faux bricks, and I have the exact same ones that CJ has, but they totally work because they're at a distance and they're out of focus. And I think it totally works in our environment to do that. It does not work when they're sitting up against them. And so you see all these podcasts where people are like a foot away from a fake brick wall. If you're going to put a foot away, it needs to be a real brick wall, to do that. And you can get brick walls that are like literally, I mean, Leo had it in the brick house. It's a half-inch thick brick, and it looks like brick because it is brick. It's heavy. So you have to think about, as you get closer to it and drop it out, and if you're ever going to have it out of focus or in focus, you got to make it look more real. And I think that's what podcasters, that's going to be the next step for them, is to make that improve on that if they're going to get that close to it. And most importantly, I think you're going to see more and more people do what we do, which is get away from the background. Move away from the background, let it drop off.
And rotate your set. Embrace the z-axis.
The z-axis.
Join the fun on the diagonal.
I'm working on it. I'm close. I'm close.
All right, that's going to wrap it for a Friday. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Coming up on Office Hours, we've got our live-only shows, members-only edition, Saturday's Q&A, and then Sunday is our 2-hour introspection episode. We talk a little bit more about the show, about the industry, get philosophical. Loads of fun. Got to be in Makana for those, so head over to officehours.global/join if you're not in there. To the panelists, thanks for being here today. It's a privilege to spend an hour on a Friday morning getting smarter, thanks to your life experience. It is much appreciated. Also, thank you to our back-end crew. They're working all the time, not just during the show, but all around it, keep us organized moving forward. And we'll look forward to seeing them tomorrow at the volunteers meeting at 9 Pacific, noon Eastern. And then finally, thanks to our producers for asking such great questions. Keep us going every day. I'm always amazed at the things that I didn't even know what to ask. And it's all thanks to your curiosity. So appreciate you keeping us going. Tlaloc traversal today is 34,000 miles. That's 55,000 kilometers and 271 million bananas for scale. See you in After Hours.
I had someone, I have a meeting this afternoon. They were like, can we meet in the Apple Vision Pro? I was like, yes. Yes, we can.
Your first virtual
my first client meeting in the Vision Pro.
You got to go redo your persona real quick.
I know, exactly.
I haven't played with that Persona Studio app. I don't know if it does
a Persona Studio app.
I guess it lets you tweak it more.
Is it from Apple?
No, that's what's weird. So I'm like, I'm dubious if it actually lets you do it, but I'm going to play with it at some point.
Yeah.
Alex, did you get him a micrometer? Your son?
Yes.
Is that what, he's got a little caliper on? Yes,
he said it made
so
an electronic micrometer, and he said it just was life changing. Like as soon as he had the micrometer, he was like, because I'd hand him things, and he'd be trying to figure it out, and I said, "Here, have this," and I had one. I just didn't have a good battery.